Okay, looking through the comments on my recent video, the review of the 56-1.4 from Viltrox, it was clear to me that you guys wanted to see a comparison to the Fuji 56-1.2. So today that's what we're going to do. First up though, we're going to go through some images. They're going to be labelled A and B, and I want you to guess which one belongs to which lens. After that, I'm going to share my thoughts and talk you through some of the differences between the two lenses. Okay, so first off, big thanks to Fuji and Viltrox for sending their lenses through for me to review. Let's talk about the build quality real quick. Now, they're both solid metal construction. There's no sort of clicky plastics. They both feel very well built, as you would expect at this stage. They both attach to the camera body really well with a confident click, and they don't have any movement there at all as well. So build quality is good. Focus. The focus rings are smooth on both, again as you would expect, and gives you a bit of confidence if you were to use it for video. There's a nice bit of resistance on both of them, so getting those smooth focus transitions. Autofocus on the two, they're both very different systems. So the autofocus on the Viltrox is a more modern STM motor that's quieter. It's silent, in fact. When you press that sort of shutter button halfway to autofocus, it's instant and you don't really notice it. The autofocus system on the Fuji is, well, it's loud, you can hear it. It's good, just as quick I think, but you can hear the motor moving and moving that arguably larger piece of glass within the lens. Now, some people have said that the Viltrox is quicker to autofocus versus the Fuji. I personally wouldn't say that, and I think I know the reason why. Now, with the Fuji, you can hear it. You can hear it actually focus, and you can hear it starting to focus, and you can hear it when it stops focusing. And I think that tied with it gives you an audible cue as to when things start and when they stop. So with the Viltrox, it feels instant because you don't really hear it. You don't really know when it starts that process of focusing and when it stops that process of focusing. It's either focused or it's not. Whereas the Fuji, there is a clear stop and start. So I think from your brain you kind of think that it's probably a bit slower because there's an audible cue there as well. So in my test, really, they were very, very similar. There's not a whole lot in it. So let's talk about aperture. Okay, so both lenses have aperture rings. The aperture ring on the Fuji is clicky, it clicks as you move through the range, and on the Viltrox it's smooth, so you can go from a smooth transition from F1.4 to F16. That's what you think, right? I mean, I know what you're going to say. Smooth aperture rings are better for video. Well, they are when they're mechanically tied to the aperture blades, but they're not in these cases. In both of these lenses, the aperture rings are controlled, aperture blades, sorry, are controlled electronically. So it doesn't matter whether or not you can move or you can smoothly transition your aperture ring from, say, f1.4 to f5.6 to deal with light or the situation, because that aperture ring, that aperture blade is still going to move electronically and snap through that range. It's not like some of the more video-centric lenses or older lenses where the aperture ring is mechanically tied to the aperture blades. This is all electronic, so it doesn't really mean a whole lot of difference between the two. They are effectively the same systems in terms of how they implement changing the aperture. It's both electronic. Now, I've speculated as to why each system has its own thing. Now, it might just be preference, sure, I get it, but I think with Viltrox it's marketing. It makes it sounds good when you say you've got a clickless aperture, but it's not actually a clickless aperture. It's a clickless aperture ring, but the actual aperture itself is controlled just like the Fuji. So you could argue that from the marketing it sounds like it's better for video, but in fact it's no better or no worse. And then also I think cost as well. I mean, when you think about how an aperture ring actually works, there's a bearing inside and there are notches that correspond with those f-stops, and when you move it, it clicks into place. Having a smooth aperture ring means that you don't have to machine those elements. It saves you time and it saves you cost. So when it comes to aperture, they're different but the same. There is no real discernible difference in terms of how they actually work. The implementation of changing the aperture is slightly different, clicky, clickless, but the end result is pretty much the same. Let's talk about image quality then. The image quality on both lenses is very good. In a studio setting, they're both, I mean, there's no real massive difference really. They're both very sharp. If you can control the light, they're both great. Both wide open, they're pretty decent. You do get some chromatic aberration on both lenses. I found actually quite a lot on the Fuji. It's not a huge issue, because, I mean, it's the same on the Viltrox. It's not a huge issue because you can correct it in post anyway. But overall, they were both fairly decent quality. Now, I'm just looking at my notes here. One thing I want to mention is that the Viltrox is sharp. It's super sharp. It's really, it's better, I think, than the Fuji. But the important thing to note, I guess, is for portraits, you don't necessarily always want that super sharp image. I mean, that's what people tell me. I'd rather have it. I guess for me, I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. It's easier to make an image softer in post than it is to increase sharpness and add detail that was never there to begin with. So both lenses are very sharp, very good at doing what they do. The Bokeh, the autofocus elements, I would argue probably better on the Fuji, and it's probably owing to that f1.2. Even though and this is one reason why I think actually the Fuji looks better when it comes to autofocus elements, is that even though the Viltrox has more aperture blades, I think it's 9 versus 7, so you could argue that on the Viltrox you would get a smoother, a more consistent circle, so that when it's rendering those autofocus elements, they look rounder and a bit more pleasing, whereas the Fuji's only got 7. The implementation on the Fuji is a bit smoother and a bit more consistent. When you look at the aperture blades on the Viltrox, when they come together, it's not a perfect circle. It's really subtle, the differences. You do get a nicer overall looking bokeh on the Fuji, but the differences are subtle. If you hadn't compared them one to one against the other, you wouldn't probably notice the difference. And yeah, so that's it really, I guess. So the image quality is good, good on both the lenses. The bokeh is better on the Fuji, in my opinion, and the Viltrox is sharper. So I guess it's that balance. They both got quirks and little eccentricities, but when it comes to image quality, pure raw image quality and sharpness of detail, the Viltrox for me does win. So when it comes to video, the body that you use, I use an X-T4, really does matter, I feel. The X-T4 crushes it when it comes to eye autofocus and tracking subjects in general. And that you can see that through any kind of lens that you attach to it. It does a really good job. But in terms of these two lenses, they are both good. They perform very well, but they both got their own quirks. The autofocus motor on the Fuji is loud. You can hear it and it's picked up if you use a shotgun mic. The autofocus motor, the STM motor, the silent motor on the Viltrox, you can't hear it. So it's arguably better for video if you're hoping to record sound from a shotgun mic or a microphone that's close to the camera or the lens. However, the Viltrox seems to snap into place. It's not always what you want when you want those smooth transitions between focus planes in video, and I didn't find that in the Fuji. So I guess it's a bit of a mix really. Neither of them are perfect. The Fuji has got its own eccentricities, it's noisy, and it's slightly more heavier. The Viltrox snaps into place, is not always what you want when it comes to video, but it's silent. So I guess it depends on your application. I was going to try and sum this up and say, you know, this is the lens for video, this is the one that you should choose. And this is like the 7th or 8th take of this little clip here. I've come to the realization there is no perfect solution for video when it comes to these two lenses. They both have their own quirks, and it really does depend on the scenario that you're in. Depending on the lens that you've got, if you've got the Fuji or you've got the Viltrox, you're gonna adapt your situation and your filming situation for that lens anyway. And I guess the important thing is that it's a portrait lens. We do demand more from lens manufacturers nowadays, and we expect them to be able to be used in the photo arena and video. But it is a portrait lens. It is designed for portraits. It's not designed for video. So whilst both lenses are capable, they don't come without a disclaimer, and you're going to have to adjust how you film to use either of the two lenses. Okay, so my final thoughts on these lenses. If you've got the Viltrox, don't rush out and get the Fuji. If you've got the Fuji, don't rush out and buy the Viltrox. At this point, they're very similar in terms of lenses, in terms of performance. They both got their own quirks and eccentricities, and you have to adapt your style to use either of them. But had you not compared the two, had you not watched a video, looking at one of the Viltrox and the Fuji, you'd be happy if it was a blind test and you were just given a lens and it was stuck on a camera and you couldn't see the branding or whatever. You wouldn't know the difference and you wouldn't really care. So I guess what it comes down to for me is value for money. The Fuji is beautiful, the bokeh is lovely, and I love that 1.2 and that extra little bit of flexibility I guess you get with low light situations. But it's 2 to 3 times the price depending on offers that are available. Is it 2 to 3 times the lens? Probably not. So at this point, if you're deciding between the two, you are making a calculation of value for money. Do I need these extra little things here, and there's not even a better lens, that's the thing. So yeah, I guess if you've got one, then don't rush out to get the other. They're pretty much the same. The Fuji is nice for its own specific reasons, and the Viltrox is great for its own reasons. I'd be really interested to know what you're going to do though. many of you are going to be watching this because you're contemplating getting the Viltrox you've maybe been saving for the Fuji. Has this made you decide to go either way? Do you own the Fuji or do you own the Viltrox? And I'd be interested to know why you picked either of those two lenses. And if maybe you've got that lens, have you considered going to the alternative? Let me know. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, put a bit of work into this, and I really appreciate your watches and your subscribes. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had a bunch of new people come along, and I really appreciate it. Your encouragement and suggestions has driven me forward and moved the situation here forward. I've improved the audio, I hope you'll agree, and the video quality and the lighting should be improved as well. So every comment and every like and every sub really does help. So, and if you're not subscribed already, like 90% of you apparently aren't, then please do me a favor and subscribe. There'll be new stuff coming up. We've got new lenses from different manufacturers, and I've been contacted by a bunch of people. So for Fuji content, APS-C stuff, lightweight gear, travel gear, then I hope there's going to be some new things and exciting things that apply to you coming up. Cheers.